I've been thinking about Marathon a lot lately, and I'm torn. Because on the one hand, I really want this game to succeed. I love Bungie games. I've put a ridiculous amount of time into Destiny. I've even platinumed Destiny 1 and 2. But on the other hand, I can't shake this feeling that something just isn't right. And I don't want this to come across as me hating on the game because it's not that. I really want this game to succeed, but I'm struggling to see the light at the end of the tunnel on this one. One of the first things I noticed, and probably one of the biggest issues for me, is just how unforgiving this world is. I'm confident when it comes to FPS games, but I died quite a few times in the tutorial, as much as I don't want to admit that. I'm not saying games shouldn't be challenging, but this just feels on a different level. As an example, I was playing with the two people that I usually play with, more casual players, and honestly after about 3 or 4 nights they were done. They completely dropped off, never asked to play it again. And that stuck with me because if you can't keep casual or even half casual players engaged, that's a huge part of the player base gone. The game throws everything at you. PvP, the AI, even the environment, all at once. And it's just constant pressure. There's barely any breathing room. And for a lot of players, especially people jumping in from work or playing with friends, having to be on point 24/7 gets exhausting. Another thing that started to wear on me pretty quickly was the loot. And this is a big one for extraction games. Loot should feel exciting. It should feel rewarding. It should make you want to go back in again. But right now, a lot of it just kind of blends together. Visually, it all sort of feels very samey. Nothing really stands out, gives you that, yes, I found something big. And when you're sort of missing that feeling, the whole loop starts to feel a bit flat. Then there's the balance between PvP and PvE. And I think this is where things get really tricky. Because in theory, this is what makes extraction games so exciting. But in Marathon, it can feel a bit overwhelming. You're dealing with AI, objectives, positioning, and then suddenly another team just shows up and takes you out of nowhere. And the third partying is constant. It feels like the second you engage anything at all, you're at risk. And I know that's appealing to some people, but to play every game like that, it's difficult. I've heard a lot of people say that Marathon is probably like the hardest extraction shooter out there, which is a really strange take for Bungie. Although I've only ever played Arc Raiders, DMZ and Marathon, so I can't speak for the others. However, another issue with this game is the sound. Audio in games like this is everything, and in Marathon it almost feels too important. Because the moment you make any noise, whether it's moving, shooting, interacting, pretty much doing anything, you broadcast your location to the entire lobby. At that point, it kind of feels like your fate is sealed. You're just waiting for somebody to show up and clean you up. And instead of creating tension in a good way, it starts to feel punishing. Like you're being discouraged from actually playing the game. With my squad, I would constantly be telling them off for making noise. There was this one time we could have avoided 2 turrets, but one of the teammates engaged them. Sure enough, a few minutes later, we got sandwiched between 2 teams who just came to investigate the noise. I understand that sneaking around and getting the jump on people is addictive, but to always play in that style of manner, it starts to wear on you after time. Now, this one's a bit more personal to me. I love raids. And when I heard that Marathon had an endgame raid, I was super excited. I've loved leading raids in World of Warcraft, doing them in Ghost of Tsushima. I'm gearing up for Yotai now, even enjoyed the Call of Duty ones. That kind of coordinated, team-based challenge, I think is some of the best content in gaming. And Marathon has elements of that which I really like, especially in this endgame part. But when you mix that with PvP, it can feel really unfair. Because when you're trying to focus on mechanics, teamwork or execution, and then suddenly another team interrupts everything, it just turns what should be a rewarding experience into frustration. Unless you've got a super competitive, on-point team, it's difficult. It's really difficult. I really want to enjoy it, but like the Destiny raids were epic. They were amazing. This with the PvP just doesn't quite feel it. It would be really nice to have like a PvE raid. Keep the game how it is. Make it tough to gain items and weapons. But when the weekend comes around, have just like one big raid PvE event where everybody sort of comes together. Maybe it takes away part of the game, but it'd be nice to have something to work towards. And you know, if you die to AI, it's one thing, but to get jumped by another team when you're weak, trying to do some raid battle, that's a kick in the teeth. You know, and I want to be clear, I don't hate Marathon. I love Bungie games. I love extraction shooters. I've made guides on both Marathon and Arc Raiders. I want these games to succeed. But right now, I just struggle to see a clear path where Marathon takes off in a big way. I checked the Steam player count about an hour ago. This is the 2nd of April when I'm making this. And it had dipped to just 10,000 players on Steam. And apparently that's where 70% of the most copies they sold was. Now for context, that was the lowest player count on that day. It peaked at around 32,000. And let's be honest, the player numbers are not going to suddenly jump up anytime soon. If that's true, I can't see it sticking around much longer. If this was an indie developer, maybe they could sustain those numbers. But as a first-party Sony studio, I mean, that's terrible. This game feels too punishing for casual players, too intense for mixed skill groups of friends. And I fear the PvP and PvE balance might just push people away more than it pulls them in. Unfortunately, I think I'm sort of leaning towards being pushed away from it. I really hope I'm wrong, and I hope they can make some changes that just makes this more accessible, without sort of losing what makes the game unique. There's definitely something special here, but as it stands, I think a lot of people are not going to get to see the end-game raid, and that's where the game does what it does best, bar maybe when you're getting jumped in PvP as you're trying to do it. So what do I think would actually fix this? I don't think this game needs a complete overhaul, but a few key changes would make a massive difference. First, I think the game needs a slightly softer entry point for casual players. Don't need the game dumbed down or easier overall, but a way to ease newcomers in. Second, the loot needs more identity. Right now, not enough of it feels exciting or memorable. There's nothing I get and I think, oh yeah, I've got to get out with this right now. And third, the balance between PvP and PvE needs tuning, because right now it just feels like you're being punished for engaging with the game. If they can get that balance right, I genuinely think this game could turn things around. But then that makes me wonder, who is this game actually made for? Because on the face of it, it feels like it's made just for the sweats, the top pro players. The endgame is so incredibly tough, you need a whole squad, all dedicated, geared and on point in order to do the raid and handle any PvP that comes their way. It's unlikely a whole squad of casuals are all going to get to level 25, all have all the gear necessary to get into the raid, and have the skill needed to deal with the raid type mechanics. But then on top of that, they've got to deal with PvP. There's no solo option here for the end game content. Now I know you can play solos for the rest of it, but for the end game you need a whole squad dedicated and ready to go. Now with a player count so incredibly low, and reports that this game cost $200 million to make, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to sustain this game for much longer. And to put in comparison with Arc Raiders, I know it's not entirely fair, they're not like for like, but they're both extraction shooters. Marathon, just over 10k today. When I just looked at Arc Raiders, it was on 85,000. And Arc Raiders has been out 6 months plus. Marathon does a lot of things right. Visually, I quite like it, but I know it's not for everybody. The gunplay feels amazing, but they've got to do something and do it fast, otherwise I think that's probably it. The real danger here is that it's not just it for Marathon. If this game does go down the pan, I'd be worried for Bungie's jobs as well. If they don't have Destiny 3 or some other game close to production, how can you warrant paying that studio, paying all those staff for the next couple of years? I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. But that's just my experience so far. I'd like to know what you think, especially if you've been playing loads like me. Are you feeling the same way? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know below. Peace.